Maybe you've seen these photos before of Bernie Sanders getting arrested at a protest in support for civil rights for black people. Bernie Sanders used these photos during his 2016 campaign a lot to portray himself as a hero to black people. He was willing to protest and even get arrested for black people during the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. And even I was taken in by these photos because they were very powerful. A picture is worth 1,000 words. However, the truth is far more insidious than that. You see, after October 7th, Bernie Sanders went mask off, and he revealed his true colors for everyone to see. So I'm going to show you some videos. I played one of these videos before, but they illustrate exactly the real moral character of Bernie Sanders going mask off. So let's watch this one first.
Excuse me, shut up! Hamas is sending missiles into Israel. Okay. And you know where some of those missiles are coming from? They're coming from populated areas. That's a fact. Hamas has used money that came into Gaza for construction purposes, and God knows they need roads and all the things that they need, and used some of that money to build these very sophisticated tunnels into Israel for military purposes.
For survival purposes.
Okay, one second.
Yes,
No, I don't want to be interrupted. The question was asked. It's a fair question, and I'm trying to.
Okay, you general has the right to
Look,
resist.
if you don't,
Yes, they did.
you know.
Gaza is like
Excuse me, shut up. Excuse me, shut up.
Excuse me, shut up. By the way, these people in the audience are Bernie Sanders supporters, and they didn't like what he had to say. So this is a more recent video, and let's see what Bernie Sanders has to say about people not wanting to vote for Kamala Harris due to her being committed to aiding and abetting Israel's genocide.
We know the election is going to be very, very close. Michigan has a large Arab American and Muslim American population that traditionally votes Democrat, but there's a lot of concern among Democrats that a lot of those voters are either going to go to third party or not going to vote at all in protest of the Biden-Harris support for Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. What do you say to those voters who are thinking about sitting out this election or voting third party, or maybe even voting for Donald Trump because they disapprove of Netanyahu and Biden-Harris's support for Netanyahu?
Well, what I say, in my own view, is, as I'm sure you know, I happen to believe that Hamas is a terrible terrorist organization that attacked Israel on October 7th. Israel had a right to respond, but it did not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people, kill 42,000, injure 100,000, and destroy.
Okay, so he just virtue signals after this point. He supports Israel because he's a Zionist. I talked a little bit about this before, but Zionism is not a monolith, it's a spectrum. And Bernie Sanders exists on that Zionist spectrum. He is perhaps center or center left. He supports Israel. He supports the genocidal state of Israel, but he may think genocide is wrong. That in combination with virtue signaling to his base, because obviously he can't remain in the Senate if he's not voted in. Here we have a weird contradiction. We were left to believe, I was left to believe, that Bernie Sanders was supportive of minority rights and minority struggle. But that was just a lie. Now, it is true that Jews were supportive of black people during the American Civil Rights Movement. But the truth about the relationship between Jews and black people in American history is far more complicated than that. I made a video talking about how the Secretary of State of the Confederacy was a Jew. His name was Judah P. Benjamin, and he owned over 140 black people as slaves. And it turned out that quite a few Jewish people during this time period owned black people as slaves. You can watch the whole video. I'll post a link to it in the description. Wikipedia even has an entire page that categorizes notable Confederate Jews who were supportive of slavery. So it's not so simple to say that Jews were always supportive of black people. Clearly they weren't, when they literally owned them as slaves. So, then why was it that Jews were supportive of black people during the American Civil Rights Movement? Well, Judge Joe Brown explains exactly why. So let's listen.
Jewish folk were catching hell in America. So if you used the Negro, colored people as a foil, if you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. So the civil rights thing helped out the Jewish community immensely. And they have insinuated themselves greatly into the economic process of the country. Plus you have English presidents like Disraeli, one of the most powerful English prime minister. He was born a Jew, but he converted to Christianity. The whole basis of the hate is not so much racial as it is your religion. That blurs the distinction because for the most part you can't tell anybody Jewish from anybody who is Christian, from anybody who is Islamic, based just on their appearance. So it's wide open in America. And then as far as the black experience goes, I remember attending a lecture by Thurgood Marshall years ago, and he said what the NAACP and himself chose to do to advance civil rights for the first part of the 20th century, since there weren't any real laws other than the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments on it, was this. They went to the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals laws that states had passed. And the theory was if you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. If you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. So a whole lot of people have benefited from us being the Miranda, so to speak, about what rights are. Miranda's not a nice guy. People don't like Negroes, but they appreciate what we have set up. And over 50 years, it has been repeated over and over. You have to be fair and impartial. You can't be racist, even though somebody might be, but that's soaked into our national persona.
Okay, so what did we learn? Jews were supportive of black people during the American Civil Rights Movement was to actually pursue Jewish interests. It was to secure anti-discrimination laws against Jewish people. So let's analyze this. So Judge Joe Brown mentioned something interesting. Jews were catching hell in the 1960s, but why? Well, the reason why was because of what was going on at the time. We're going to take a look at the American Zionist Council. In the 1960s, people were becoming wise to the fact that American Jews were using the American government to pursue the interests of Israel, a foreign entity, in particular, the American Zionist Council. In 1962, it was forced to register as a foreign agent. Jewish Zionists exploited a loophole and pursued the same exact agenda with its former subsidiary, AIPAC. So while the AZC was forced to register as a foreign agent, AIPAC was never forced to register as a foreign agent because JFK was assassinated literally a year after this in 1963. 1 year later, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 came into effect as a reaction to discrimination against black people. However, the act doesn't mention black people at all. Instead, it's a net, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of a lot of stuff. And as we heard before, Jews directly benefited from this act, despite the act being a consequence of racism against black people. Jews supported the act not because of any altruistic concern for black people, but rather due to pursuing legislation that would directly benefit Jewish people. So why did Bernie Sanders protest for black people and get arrested? It wasn't because he was a hero. It was to benefit Jewish people. Bernie was taking advantage of the black civil rights movement to pursue Jewish interests and secure legal protections for Jews. And that's the real reason why. See ya.